20 years after a law to help disabled people went into effect, access to restrooms and parking is still a problem.
And News 13 has learned some North Carolina DOT facilities, including highway rest areas, continue to violate federal law.
News 13's Frank Fraboni joins us with more in these compliance concerns. What kind of violations are these, Frank?
Well, Larry, these are violations that make it harder for people with physical handicaps. It's why the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1991, but today some state agencies are still violating the federal law. For Americans with disabilities, the simplest things.
Each of us as Americans have the same right and liberty, and I don't feel like I need to be shorted because I'm an individual with a disability.
Can be very difficult. Bart Floyd lost a leg and suffered a traumatic brain injury in a car accident at age 21.
Check his voicemail right quick.
Today, he's an advocacy coordinator for the nonprofit agency Disability Partners in Asheville.
I go out and do accessibility surveys in the community. I work with the businesses to understand their requirements. And if you sit down and talk to somebody and realize that the big majority of accommodations can be done for less than a couple $100.
We took Floyd to one of several state DOT-operated facilities.
This talks about the parking distribution.
Violating the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA rules. The first noticeable violation?
Let's see, accessible route.
Handicapped parking spaces at a highway rest stop that are supposed to be the closest to the building.
Well, even if you're taking a look, right now there's a lady up there with a walker.
That are actually the furthest.
You see, they parked down there where there wasn't accessible space, so they would have short distance.
This handicapped woman, a perfect example of what's wrong with the signs at this I-26 rest stop.
I noticed when we parked, I said, I wonder why they're way down there, and then I said, well, they're by the picnic tables.
She ignored the handicapped spots in the long walk.
I'm more mobile than a lot of people.
And parked right in front of the restroom.
So people do what they have to do, but, you know, all people don't have the ability just to jump up the curb. You know, people in wheelchairs don't have that ability.
Another problem? No van accessible signs.
This access aisle makes a van accessible space, but, you know, they don't even have signs up.
Up the road at the Hendersonville driver's license office, the bathrooms didn't measure up either.
See, I measure. Yeah, it's 27.5.
Sinks were too low for a wheelchair. Toilets were too close to the sidewall, and knobs on the sink controls.
See these turn knobs? Some people with disabilities can't grip. That's why the lever is important.
The violations were first cited in a 48-page 2009 DOT internal audit.
We know that the state received a lot of complaints about compliance.
Disability rights advocates say many of the violations could have easily been fixed. But our investigation reveals years later they still exist.
I'm dismayed that the state is still not in compliance, particularly a state that relies on tourism.
Once you get out and try to live your life as an individual that's got the same rights as everybody else, it frustrates you when you can't gain access.
However small the infraction, Floyd feels the state should set a better example.
It's very frustrating that the people that should be setting the standard aren't even doing the minimum.
Giving people with handicaps.
I mean, it just makes sense. People with disabilities are people first.
The same rights and privileges.
Just common decency to treat your fellow man the way you want to be treated.
As everyone else.
They're not willing to. There's no ADA police. But, you know, when somebody sues you, then you're going to wish you had listened to me and done the simple things that I suggested.
In fairness to the DOT, a spokesman says the audit was a self-assessment and the violations are being addressed. Coming up tomorrow, we'll meet with a local DOT engineer who says he can explain why some of these violations still exist. Larry, Darcel.